Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and my name's Chris Flisher, and astrology is a fascinating topic. I spend almost all my days and nights thinking about astrology because it means so much to me, and I think especially given our current times, we're seeing the relevance of astrology even more so than usual, because what we're seeing on the charts, on the global stage, and the mundane charts, meaning for the whole world, we can actually see coming to fruition in our daily headlines, which I think is remarkable. So it shows that there's great logic and synergy there between the two sciences. Before we get started, I got a great guest today. You guys are going to be blown away when you see who I have coming on today. Widely known guy. You'll know about him in a second. Before I get started, though, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, I do a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology, so that affects all of us, and then I bust it out in the individual signs. I encourage you to always read your sun sign and your rising sign. Put the two together, and you'll see what's going to be happening in your week to come. So, without further ado, it's my great pleasure today to have David Palmer, the Leo King. The Leo King is on today, and he is as hot as can be when it comes to astrology. He's all over the place. His website is The Leo King, one long word, The Leo King. He is taken astrology to a height where I have not seen it in my career, which I think is just remarkable. I mean, he's brought it into the mainstream. He's made it hip. He's made it pertinent for all of us, and he's done a great service to the astrological community, and I think he should be commended for that. So, David, welcome to the show. It's great to have The Leo King on here once again.
I know. It's good to be with you, Chris. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I totally just appreciate it so much.
Well, but you deserve it. You know, you really do. You've done quite a bit to, when I first met you, probably was about 5, maybe 10 years ago at one of the UAC conferences. And, you were not then what you are now. And you've just kicked it up a total notch and brought astrology to a much wider audience, I think. And I think it's your unique style, your unique personality, the Leo personality of you that has the charisma to bring it to that level. And I'm just curious how you've gone about that and what you're seeing in the world of astrology that's changed over the years, and what makes people more interested in it now, you think?
I just think, number one, when I met you, it was 2012 at UAC in New Orleans, and I had just got into it as far as fully immersed into it, and I saw that social media was becoming big, and I was like, I'm just going to start pushing this stuff out there. People thought I was crazy talking about astrology, especially in my generation. I'm Generation Y. I went on a bunch of reality shows in the 2000s, and people just thought I was talking about some gibberish or just all that astrology stuff, but I knew that it would catch on. I don't know what it was. I just thought Neptune and Pisces. I just thought all these things were starting to build up, and I knew people were starting to get more into it. So I found that hole in the marketplace that was having kind of like a Tony Robbins / astrology kind of inspirational, kind of combining both of those and really giving life to astrology in a positive and getting through kind of the harder stuff and showing that it's all going to be okay and helping people understand these rhythmic cycles.
Well, you've made it a difficult, there's a difficult pivot people have to make when it comes to astrology, because astrology does require a little more personal investment. Like the client, like your clients, they have to be invested in wanting to learn about themselves and make their lives better. So they're using astrology as a tool to help them with timing. But there's always been this stigma around astrology that it's some sort of, weird, people get all crazy about it because of the popularity that it has had in the past. But you've been able to manage to bridge that gap by making it relevant to today's terms. And I think it's the language you use, it's the presentation you use that sort of gets it out of that cerebral brainy area where people tend to get foggy eyes when you start talking to them. Mm-hmm. And you've made it more palatable in some capacity. And there's got to be a knack to that. I think probably using common language, using hip terms, relating it to current events, all elaborate and support it. And I think, and also the other thing is that logically, as more time goes on, we're going to have more empirical data that would support astrology as a general principle. So being able to get that spot is really it's an interesting spot to get to, because you've been to the conferences. You know that a lot of these people are incredibly intelligent, very cerebral people who are just, there's a lot out there. You can easily lose people if you get too deep in the weeds with astrology, but you've been able to manage that nice level spot where people can relate to it on their own personal levels.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad that you brought that up, because there's so many amazing people in our community. And, you know, going to a lot of these conferences, that's where I saw the hole in the market. It was reaching just other astrologers. It wasn't reaching, there's a whole bunch of people who, whether they're amateurs or whether they're just astrology fans or whether they're just getting interested into it, there really was nowhere to go. And some of the places that there were to go were really just boring and bland and just your typical sun sign horoscope, right? It was kind of like there wasn't life to it. There wasn't, like you said, you know, finding ways to do it. Like I've kind of mixed a stand-up comedian at some points with it. I've mixed also doing more of a presentation style, whether that's kind of, like I said, Tony Robbins, or even going all the way into more of an academia style, but bringing visualizations, using technology, using, you know, drawing the charts out and like using live stream platforms with TV cameras. So I really took the television, you know, personality of mine and the TV that I've learned all throughout the last 20 years of my life and brought it to astrology to be able to reach people without it just being a webcam. Because I think when it's just a webcam, people kind of just don't take it real. Like they kind of just are like, oh, this is just somebody at their desk, or this is just somebody, you know, doing this. So building TV studios, like really investing all the money that I make through doing readings and through doing my apps and all these things and putting it back into making the content better.
Yeah, it's much more of an entertainment. I mean, I don't mean entertainment in a derivative way. I mean it in a very positive way. It has to engage people. We have to find a way for us to engage people and understand, because astrology is complicated. And when you start talking what I call astrobabble, you know, Venus, trine Mars, whatever, people get lost in that. You've got to be able to bridge that gap between common language and the accuracy that astrology can bring. And I think that making it more entertaining in that regard makes it far more compelling as opposed to just some talking head, like you say. It's got to be more lively, and they've got to see real value. I mean, there is real value. It's accurate. We look at the newspaper today, and it is just, it's spot on with regard to where things are. I mean, it's just, we were talking about this back in 2012. We said, wow, wait till 2020 gets here. We're going to be seeing things really shaking up, and we're seeing it unfolding as we see. So that in itself is proof, and it's just all people need is to see that proof. And if you can do that, that's a great service to the communities, be able to get that out there. And do you think that your client base is changing? Are you getting all ranges of people? Are you getting younger people to come see you, or are they reaching new generations with this?
There's definitely been the millennials that have opened up in a big way. But I would say that my general audience, the main core, is about 25 to 55 female.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, females are much more interested in it. Yeah, for sure. There's always that strain of the feminine curiosity about trying to understand themselves. It's more the feeling, maternal nature of the female. I think that's more curious about that, where men are more like, let's just go out and be men or whatever. You know, they don't have quite the same level of empathy, I think. So I think it's more common for women to be involved with astrology.
Yeah, and I also think there was an interesting day saying that why straight men don't like astrology. And I was kind of like, what? I was like, what a weird article, because I know a lot of straight men who love astrology. And it was a big article on Vice, actually. And Sam Reynolds posted it up, and a bunch of other astrologers posted it up. And I feel that, you know, we're in a world right now where especially masculinity and kind of being a typical man, you know, we're having to break through that kind of stigma. And when it comes to doing conscious work and all these, you know, developments of soul, you know, I think that it's starting to have its breakthrough. There's a lot more men in the world that are starting to go, you know what? There is something to more than just astrology, but to being aware of what's going on. I don't want to live my life, you know, having to be living by some sort of stigma of how to be, but who am I individually, and what is my purpose, and what am I supposed to be doing here? Because I think a lot of, whether it's men or women, we're all kind of, I think this Uranus Aries stuff that's been going on for the last decade has really been this freedom of, well, who are you? What are you really? You don't have to be this kind of cornerstone, I'm a man this way and I'm a female this way.
Yeah, there's a sort of there's a much more of a larger embracing of the feminine mystique, for lack of a better word, by men. I think men are less intimidated by showing their feminine side, and we are in a time of enormous some spiritual recovery. Which, if you think about it, last time Neptune was in Pisces 160 some odd years ago, whenever it was, that's when we saw another great rise of spiritualism with the Theosophical Society and people like that, and even going back to the Concordians and the Walden people. All of that came to light back in 1848, and here we are back at a time where it's resurging again, based on that influence of Neptune and Pisces, and of course that's also responsible for a lot of the fake news that we're seeing when we had all that going on. But I think it's important that and I think we are in a time period, very long time period, where we are switching from a sort of a masculine-based society to more of a maternal-based, feminine-based society, where I think we'll see the next female president over the next 10 years or so. I think we're going to see, we've already seen it in the latest elections, a huge number of new candidates are coming in that are women who never ran before. So there's a real surge there. And I think that was kicked off by an event of mammoth proportions, which I would trace back almost to the eclipse of August of 2017, where that eclipse went right across the country of the United States. You could see it starting out in Oregon, and it worked its way all the way across, and it literally drew a line right through the United States, which is symbolic of the division we have in this country. I mean, here we have this solar eclipse just plowing right across the center of the United States, and here we are in this very divisive society. So astrology now is probably more relevant than ever because it does point to where the answers lie.
Exactly. It's so relevant, and people are at this wake up, like you bring up the whole Neptune Piscean element. I mean, really, this was a great big shift, whether we look at the Mayan shift of 2012 and then that Venus eclipse to me as well, which we're not going to see for another 100 years. Right. I mean, that was all, it's been too perfect. And since 2012, it's been this massive buildup. And I think that finally, after, what we've been through for the last 6 years since that transit of all this scorpionic energy that has been intense and the biggest that we'll ever see mathematically, I think that this has been the deeper going into everybody's souls, working through all their stuff, and now truly rising and ready to see this new world. And people are open more than ever to so many different things. And, I think also just even if you look at entertainment and the entertainment community, whether it's been the History Channel or whether it's been the Discovery Channel, they've been doing more specials on the ancients and the pyramids and the connections to all of the different placements in the sky. So I think people are more open now because there's been all areas that are starting to open up to it.
I also think that astrology fills a void that cannot be filled by other sort of traditional religious constructs. I mean, as we see scandal rising through the churches and the sort of those traditional sort of spiritual outlets, we see this, people are becoming disenfranchised with it. They're becoming disillusioned by what they're seeing there. And this is far more mechanical. If you think about it, I mean, astrology is the nature of the universe, and the only thing that's in charge of this is the mathematical swirl of the universe. What could be a greater power than that, rather versus some sort of man-made religious construct which pins people into areas that they don't like? So I think that the disillusionment with current religious practices has led a real sway towards astrology by the same token, because it does answer questions with logic, and they are based in mathematics. I mean, it's all there. So really interesting.
It's all there. And I also think it's interesting, like the science community, they've got their laws, but there's got to be there's probabilities in the universe. And I think that astrology fits into this whole other category. On one side, you've got religion. The other side, you've got this scientific community. And it's the bridge between both.
Yeah, it really does. It satisfies both. What do you think is the biggest challenge for people to learn astrology? Do you think that it's too complicated for them? Is it require too much self-work?
I've thought it's, from my experience and my success from it, it's been the presentation style.
Right.
It's been it's been having, kind of like I'm going to use a very funny example, but like, Mr. Rogers is a very good example of how children were changed from adult and actually wanting to hear from an adult. There's an aspect in astrology where there's got to be a similar approach. I mean, at the beginning, at least, there's got to be some sort of content or something, especially in today's society. It's fast moving. It's hip. You've got to have lingo, and I hate to say it, there's a look aspect to it as well. Like, and I think that's where the astrology community has kind of given me a lot of, I guess you could say, some negative aspects. They think I'm all show and no dough, or whatever you want to call it. I don't putt for the dough, I'm all just the big driver on the golf course or something. But the truth is I'm understanding the marketplace and delivering the deep stuff, but you just can't shove it down their throat right away.
No.
And so I have different tiers, like, and whether people, where they're at in their world of astrology, I always have that available.
Mm-hmm. I think that I think if anything, it's probably just envy about how far you've been able to go with astrologers, because this has been a typically academic, cerebral kind of intellectual community, because we're talking about such large social mores and we're talking about cultural shifts and all that stuff. Those are all reflected in astrology. When you bring it down and make it into, like you say, into a more of a palatable presentation, it brings more people in, and they begin to understand the logic of how it actually works. And it's not just empty talk. It's really, really accurate. But you've been to parties, I'm sure I have, where you start talking about astrology, people just shake their head or roll their eyes or walk away, but they always know their sign. I know that much. They always know what sign they are. And they can't get around that. And they're always curious about some way, but they say, I'm asking for a friend. But they do. And I think a lot of people are secretly in love with astrology, but are afraid to admit it because of the stigma attached to it. And I think you've done great work with removing that stigma, because you're making it into something that makes sense. It has to become part of the public vernacular. I'd like to see it go as far as getting back into the school systems, where, can you imagine if you were in high school, if you didn't know what you wanted to do, and you had an astrologer who could sit down with your chart and say, hey, this is the best area for you to go. I think you'd have great results, as opposed to sending kids off to schools for doing things that they don't want to do. Send them where they want to do. I had a perfect example. This guy, one of my clients, was a lawyer. His father wanted him to be a lawyer in the worst way. He went to law school, did all the goddamn stuff, got himself a job, but was miserable. And he actually came to me, and I said, listen, man, you got all this earth sign. What you should be working with your hands. He says, well, I want to be a potter. I said, well, go be a potter. So he calls me back, 3 or 4 years later. He wanted to become a potter, and he's never been happier. And if he had known that in high school, he wouldn't have fallen victim to his father's urging to get him into law school, to be something that society wanted him to be. So,
or these tests, I think they said I was supposed to be a forest ranger.
Well, maybe you like the woods and being outside, but
it's funny. I kind of do. I live on the beach, though. I mean, maybe it should have said beach lifeguard, but that's the whole thing. Is they don't really get these things right in school. You are right.
Yeah. There's so many different angles to it too. I mean, there's all the different aspects that we see in the charts are critical, I think, as far as the development of the personality. I always think of it as an owner's manual. I think the chart is an owner's manual for you, the individual. And then there's your assets and your liabilities are all there. You work to your assets and you try to fix your liabilities. I think that's really how simple as it is. But the language and the delivery is a critical piece. Now, in your case, you've got a fantastic Facebook following. You've got your own television show. You've done a lot of things that promote this. But on a regular basis, this has got to be an exhausting schedule for you.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm lucky to have a wife that understands it.
Mm-hmm. She's beautiful. I met her. She's beautiful. Yeah, you're very lucky.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really scored with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and doing this work I've dedicated to make it where there is no such thing as kind of a normal schedule or a normal life. There is no, it's 5 p.m., leave the office kind of situation. I mean, I'm out of here at midnight 80% of the time. I'm in here at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and I'm working all day into all night.
All day, and talking with clients and doing your own videos, all that during that time. Right?
Yeah. I do about 21 to 25 videos a week. So that's a lot in itself. Then, of course, I do 2 to 3 clients a day, but I only do that 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm a writer, so I just had a magazine come out nationally and all through Canada. It's on every Walmart. There hasn't been an astrology magazine about the year that's actually like next to People magazine for I don't know how long. I don't know. It's been decades is what my publisher told me.
It has been decades. I mean, the last time I think I saw an astrology magazine on a bookshelf in a bookstore was probably Mountain Astrologer. That probably was 10 years ago. Almost everybody now gets it through subscription, but it's not on the newsstand. So that's nice to see that as well. And it's should be right up there with the Farmer's Almanac because, it's just as accurate.
Yeah. So doing that this year was a big task because I would stay up from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. to write that.
Mm-hmm. And you go through all the aspects of the month, each month through the whole year.
Yeah, it was looking through celebrity charts. It was looking through, the president's chart. It was looking through the economy, where that's going to go. It was looking at politics in general and the world politics and having to make predictions for all those areas because, an astrology magazine that was going to go out, it wasn't just about 12 signs. It was about trying to big predictions in the world in all these different areas, which was pretty major. It was like, I'm predicting the Queen's going to step down in 2019. I'm predicting, is it going to be Charles or is he going to throw it to one of his children? And looking at Charles' chart, it looks like it's going to be Charles, Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of these big aspects that you have to really take, looking at the charts, looking at the transits, and writing it all out.
It's a significant task.
While doing video. And
significant task and admirable. Yeah. I mean, an enormous amount of work. But you're seeing the results of your hard work come to light. You're an amazingly popular astrologer. As I said, I think what you've done for the community is so admirable. We all owe you a debt. I mean, just because by virtue of raising, a rising tide lifts all boats. And if you're raising the tide, we're all getting pulled up with you as a result. And I think that's admirable, and it's great.
And I hope people think that and know that, because I think you know me well enough, Chris, where that's my personality. Like, this isn't about me at all. Like, I really love the community and I love the people in it. And I become friends, and I just want everybody to do great. Like, I feel like that's the way the world should be. I believe in win-win.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And I think you got to just push aside whatever criticisms you get and march on, because you're seeing the fruits of your labor are obviously coming true. So you should put down the detractors and just keep on moving. And that's what I would do. I mean, and I'm sure you have taken great confidence.
Says the wonderful Aries.
Well, listen, and I love the fact that you did probably the first world tour in a mobile home of touring around the United States this summer, which I think was a fabulous idea. How was that received?
Oh, it was really well received. I tried it in 2014 just in my truck and did hotels, and we did well in 2014. But I was like, it's so exhausting being in hotels all the time. And this time I was like, I'm going to use my, I have a fifth wheel, 43 foot, and a dually truck. So it was a lot easier, and brought my whole team and was able to bring my own stage and lighting to these places and do full-blown, I did it like a stand-up comedy tour, mm-hmm. where I'd go into a big city. We had 100, 150 people at each place, sold it out. I'd do a meet and greet, and then I would talk about the astrology, and I picked in every city a certain subject. So whether it was the future of politics in Washington, D.C., or the future of business in New York, or, the future of home and family I did down in the South in Nashville, Tennessee. There was all these different, elements of where I was predicting astrology was going and targeting in that way. Yeah.
And it's just when you're on the road like that and you're face to face meeting the flesh of the people in the crowds, their response to you was very positive. I mean, they wouldn't be going there if they didn't believe it, right? So it worked, obviously.
You know what's crazy, Chris, is when we were in Chicago at UAC this year, right. I did my own show across the street from UAC because I wasn't allowed to speak. But it was funny because so many people went, hundreds of people, and then I threw a party afterwards. And so all these UAC people were it was like a rave. They were all looking for my place to go to the party to see where I had a party, because I always would throw a party at the end with DJing and music and dancing. And it was just interesting. But people were driving from Oklahoma to get to Chicago.
Yeah.
People were driving 24 hours, sleeping in their car just to go see an astrologer talk. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even go to UAC because there is no it's not like UAC is not Disneyland of astrology. Like, it is like the opposite. It's like Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
It's like going back to a college lecture in some ways.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people want to hear astrology. And I bet you there's a million astrologers they want to hear at these conferences, but there isn't a portal for that. Mm-hmm. So it's creating that portal. People will drive 24 hours and not sleep to go watch an astrologer talk.
Yeah, because they know that there is an element there of truth, and they know that the future can be seen, and once you know it, you can plan so much better. I'm surprised that you couldn't go to UEC and do that. You had to go across the street. Huh?
You had to go across the street, and that's why I also had my own booth at UAC, where I just said, fine, I'll just throw on my cameras and do live streaming 6 days for the whole entire thing, and interview a bunch of astrologers, you know, and just to get the word out to the fan base of astrology, because that's where astrology lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're making a huge difference. I think you're making an impression and leaving an impression on a lot of astrologers that they're scratching their head thinking, we should be thinking this way as well. I think you're going to change. I think you've shifted the whole dialogue in some ways in a very not subtle way, and that's a compliment. You've shifted the dialogue to where people now see the relevance far greater than they used to. We're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. We're talking today with Leo King, the one and only Leo King. His website is The Leo King. I would definitely check out his website. I would subscribe to his app if I were you. I'd look him up on Facebook, follow him on YouTube, all the outlets that you possibly can. He's an enormous powerhouse he's a powerful voice for astrology, and I'm very grateful that he's there. We'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit in the second half of the show about what's going on in the year to come, so hang in there. We'll be right back.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today, I have a great honor of having the Leo King on. David Palmer is with me today, and we're talking about astrology for the year, and about astrology in general, and about his impact on the astrology community, which is phenomenal. But we're going to work this next segment. We're going to talk about the coming year, 2019. And this year is going to be a pivotal year leading up into the 2020s, when we're going to see, I think, quite a bit of changes. So I'm curious as to what jumps out at you when you look at the year 2019. What's the major thing that jumps out at you?
the first thing is having a lot of these planets in their home signs. I mean, Saturn in its home sign, Neptune. We start the year off with Mars in its home sign. Jupiter's in its home sign. We're going to see, you know, with the North Node also being in Cancer and the South Node being in Capricorn, and having every time the Moon passes by and Saturn in the South Node. I mean, there's so many things that are all coming home. I mean, if you look at this summer with the Sun in Leo, we're going to have even more. It's just going to be this intense year. Saturn and Pluto are finally coming to their conjunction point, which hasn't happened since 1983 in Libra. I mean, there's a 35-year cycle closing here about major relationship shifts. Also, Saturn, Pluto were in Scorpio in 84 for a moment. So we're closing this Libra-Scorpio story that has been going on for literally almost 40 years. I mean, to me, it's huge. I mean,
it's significant. It's significant.
It's huge.
Especially when you look at the chart of the United States. I think I use the Sibley chart, which is I think it's 5:08 p.m., which puts Sagittarius on the ascendant. That's what I use.
So do I. I'm a big believer in that chart, too.
I think it just makes. I don't like the other ones as much. It just doesn't make sense. And I think of this as a Sagittarius country. We're very much. That's how we express ourselves outwardly. We got that big, bravado part of us. But having all these major changes coming up, especially with the Saturn and Pluto, I mean, when we look at the chart of the United States, it really is about reconstruction. I mean, it's really, and we can see the roots of reconstruction already there. We can see the division. The division is what happens before you reconstruct. So we have to find a way to go through the hard stuff of that division, which I think is going to be the Jupiter. It's going to be Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, all together in Capricorn in 2020. That's really going to. By then, we will have seen the tide has turned. Now, the way things are set up now, in my mind, is that however we may feel about the political landscape of the United States, I would argue that it's there, either whether we like it or we don't like it. If we don't like it, it's there as a result of a forcing function. If we didn't have this sort of slap in the face, whatever you want to call it, we would not move. We'd become placated. We'd become, lazy. So I think that having this sort of the shake-up, as preposterous as it may be at times, is a prod to push the pendulum the other way. And I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is events that haven't happened for. I mean, if you look at Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, hasn't happened since 1517.
Yeah.
Then if you go back to the last Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn with Jupiter in Capricorn with a node in Capricorn, we go back to 1282 through 84. So, I mean, we're talking about, a Renaissance period that is happening right now, but at the same token, I feel like this is a period in time where there is a lot of, human shadow work that's being forced to kind of be worked out, and it's not fun, but it is the ultimate quest. I think the reason why a lot of us have been brought on this planet are going to find out why this whole entire charade of life has been going on during these next 2 years. It's going to really start to appear and be clear.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of confusion, and I think that this is going to bring a lot of events that are going to, help us understand why the timing is here. I mean, like you brought up about with Mars and having also Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn and the South Node all in Capricorn, I mean, literally at the beginning of 2020 is literally just blowing my mind, because a lot of people think, it's that moment, but, it's the buildup to me that is that you start
always
to see everything.
Yeah, it's always the applying pressure. It's the applying. After it happens, it begins to dissipate. It's already happened at that point. So we're right in that trenches right now. We're seeing those changes happen. And as outrageous as the headlines may be, it's all part of the process. When you talk about the shadow period, that's defined by a period of sort of confusion or disillusionment or a lack of clarity about where we're going. Is that what you would call the shadow period?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has been because, and I'm really a big thing about this scorpionic, 6-year transit that we're finishing up at the end here of 2018. And once Venus is out, literally there is no more big planets, outer planets, or even, Venus. There's nothing going to be going on in Scorpio. It's just going to be in and out. So we're done with the Mars retrograde there. So this has been this kind of shadow work, I call it, this darker shade of trying to understand these deeper inner parts of ourself that we all have kind of had to wake up to. And I think that there's been kind of like a hold since 2012. I think everybody's had to face like some really weird stuff inside that they didn't really know was coming. You know, Scorpio kind of comes out of nowhere and pops in your face like a cockroach comes out of a toilet.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that we've been dealing with a lot of cockroaches coming out of the toilet in all of our own lives, and it's all private. Nobody really puts it fully out there, you know.
Of course, that's the nature of Scorpio.
Yeah, and I think that with that ending, and with 2019 being the Sagittarian Capricorn story, and my center point in astrology as well, I think that this is really us trying to finally understand what is going on Earth, in the world, in the universe. I think that we've had to deal with our own kind of holdbacks internally, but also clear them. And I think that clearing point's coming to its end. And I think that this is going to be an adventure of a lifetime, truly, of really exploring who we are, where are we going, and what is this new millennium about. I think that the whole new millennium hasn't found its true bravado yet, I guess we could say. I mean, the last time that the nodes were in this space was, 2000, 2001, which we ended up with a major traumatic event of 9/11, and then we went into these major wars. So we really didn't start the millennium very good.
No. And I think those
are
all
Y2K crisis.
Yeah, those are all forcing functions that created it. I think the idea you bring up make a good point about the scorpionic sort of themes that we had with Jupiter there, and then now with Venus as well. It comes down to that. It forces us to dig deeper and perhaps even reveal parts of ourselves we wouldn't ordinarily like to. But I think in that process of being revealed, of revealing, there's a certain liberation in that. When you kind of get it off your chest, and this is who I am, warts and all. And if you can live with that and accept that and go forward with that, then you're sort of over the hump, and it's not as bad as it looks. And I think we have to go through that process, each of us individually. That's probably what you're referring to.
Yeah, and I like how you bring it up, warts and all. I mean, that's the whole thing. Scorpio, it's not makeup like Taurus. It's not a Band-Aid that's, your skin color like Taurus. It's raw and it's real.
It's raw and it's real. Yeah.
And that's all we've been experiencing, because October 2012, boom, Saturn enters. Then you get the nodes that enter, and the eclipses through the 14 and all through that, and then in 2015, Saturn finally leaves when it finally has a big square to Jupiter. I mean, it was not fun. And then you get into Mars retrograde in Scorpio in 2016, and then 2017 is Jupiter in Scorpio, and then in 18 it's the whole finishing of Jupiter. So it's literally been 6 years.
Yeah, certainly has been. I know it's exhausting. It is. There's no question about it. What do you think about? I mean, now after the beginning of the year, we're going to see Uranus finally getting into Taurus after having lingered in Aries for this time. That is going to be quite a significant upset, I think, because Uranus, as we all know, delivers surprises, and I think that it's going to be moving into the archetypal 8th house. What does that indicate? That indicates money. It indicates we're talking about a lot of people are predicting some sort of financial realignment as the course of that over that course of that time, and you would certainly think we'd have to be with we're having all these official things put in place like tariffs and new regulations being stripped away that open up the door for a new pathway forward. I'm wondering what you think that looks like. I mean, that to me looks like a major correction of some sort coming up.
There's definitely a major correction with financial aspects, or even just the way we are going to, whether we trade or what do we even call value of money? What is that going to look like? Whether, especially since, now that Uranus is here and we have technology like we've never had before, it's going to be interesting to see the reevaluation of what is valuable in technology. So I think we've seen this big boom in tech companies for so long, but I also think it's interesting to see that Uranus and Taurus brought also the biggest downfall this year of stocks and stuff, of Facebook and all these things. So, I think there's going to be a reevaluation of what is intellectual property that is technologically based, and also I think intellectual property, which kind of is Taurian, right? Are your own creation of things. Like, what is this new value system? I think we've put value on things with this Uranus and Aries transit, reality stars kind of started the whole, Uranus and Aries thing, and now nobody cares about a reality star at all. Right. I think it's really kind of brought up like the individualized form, and now bringing to what is the value of things in the world. But the interesting thing to me about this Uranus-Taurus transit, the biggest one, is it's happening right when Pluto is at the exact degree in Capricorn of the Boston Tea Party. During in the 1770s, right before we went into the Revolution. And it's interesting with the tariffs you brought up, and with taxes, and with people kind of just not digging the way the system's working. So having Uranus and Taurus here while we're having the same alignment of Pluto during the Boston Tea Party and this whole crazy element is definitely bringing a deeper look into how is this going to work? Are people literally going to start just go building planes and automobiles and ships like they did the last Uranus-Taurus? I think, of course, there's elements of that, but I think it's way broader than that this time.
Right. I wonder if people are going to become, I think you're right about the idea of them people rebelling. I think the tie to the Boston Tea Party is huge. That's a really big historical cycle that makes sense now. But I also think that I'm wondering if people aren't going to become backing away in some way and becoming more self-sufficient as a result, not being able to rely on these big governmental things that they have in the past. If those are all getting torn down, will that force people to then work into a way of becoming more self-sufficient independently? But we're still tied to this huge digital network of all our transactions. Everything is all digital. We don't see paper anymore. So something in there makes the whole thing incredibly vulnerable, and that's what worries me about it because of the combination of Uranus there. What would that look like? If we had some sort of electronic meltdown and there's no paper to back anything up, what do you do in that case? It's only as good as electricity and magnetic drives. What does that look like? Does that mean some sort of do people return to a tribal kind of mentality where they have to, because all they've got to survive is to be with the community? So Facebook has introduced a whole new concept of community, but it's a virtual community. I'm thinking that this is going to be more of an actual physical on-the-ground community, which is where people really need to be. It's only when you have those 150 people in a room with you doing a talk about astrology that you feel enlivened and part of the situation. You don't feel the same way when you're standing behind a camera, even though you may be reaching a much larger audience. It's when you're face-to-face that you feel the real impact of what it means to be a human being. I could see that as a return over the next coming years of some sorts.
100. I'm so glad you brought that up because, sure, 2019 is a lot of Capricorn, right? And even into 2020. But once we get into this Jupiter, Saturn, Aquarian stuff, and Pluto coming into Aquarius in this next, decade, with Uranus and Taurus, that doesn't look too good with electrical systems and the grid, like you say. And unfortunately, Uranus is at its fall position in Taurus, right? It's not, because if you think about Uranus, it wants to reach the heavens and it wants to break apart everything, but it's in the most fixed Earth sign. So it's kind of like a drill to the center of the Earth. Like, it's not going to happen as fast as it wants. It's not able to disrupt as much because there's so much Earth around. So I think the biggest problem is, you're right, people are going to have to be self-sufficient, but I think with all this Capricorn and a South Node in Capricorn, there are these corporations, there's government entities, there's this control system that is so intense, the most we've ever seen in our life, that's going to have its preventative aspects. And here's Uranus fighting for individual, freedom of your own abilities to create. But I've seen it. Think about this. Like, I own an app, and I put everything out. People don't even realize how much money it costs to do that, to go outside of Facebook, to go outside of YouTube, to go outside and create your own network and have people be able to subscribe and watch. The prices are astronomical. They charge you per transcoding minute of each second of every video. If people just knew that to get to that self-sufficient place, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength. And I think the other part of this that's going to be the most difficult, but yet if you understand it, it won't be, is that it takes risk now with a lot of this Capricorn energy. And it really does kind of let you know in Capricorn, you only need what you need. So I think this whole idea of like, I'm safe because I have $200,000 in my bank account for retirement is going to be kind of a thing of the past. You only need what you need when you need it.
And it's going to be very current. It's going to be what you need today. Yeah. What do I need today? I need water today. I need food today. I need a hug today. That's about as good as it's going to get. I think you make a really good point about Uranus in Taurus, because Uranus is, I think of Uranus as just completely scattershot, wild, spontaneous, electrical impulse, rebellion, and all that. And Taurus is just this slow, methodical, bull in the, just plodding along, unable to move. And I think there's going to be a real frustration there between that. But there's also the idea, and if it does come down to that, and the idea of Uranus is about radical differences. So if we come to that point, here isn't an earth sign. Earth is all about getting back to nature, being able to survive off the land. I could see that as a byproduct of Uranus in Taurus, just by virtue of the impatience of what's happening with Uranus. The people say, we're not comfortable enough living in a virtual reality world all the time. We're not comfortable living in a Facebook society. We want to live in a society where we actually shake hands and have a cup of coffee with people. And that has been lost in some ways. Now, you have thousands of followers on Facebook. I mean, how many of them do you really know? Seriously.
Yeah, that's the thing. I do go out to do the tours and stuff. So, and then
you get more meeting with the people. Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would only say a couple thousand, 3,000, 4,000, something like that in person.
Right. But still, you have to admit there's a much greater, more satisfying feeling when you are in person with people. Yeah, than it is when you're just shouting to the wind and not knowing who's hearing you.
Right? Because you're in the moment and time goes away, and the next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. and you're like, wow, I think I need to go get some sleep, but I don't want to. I mean, I can talk to hours, with everybody, and everybody having just a good time and sharing stories, and there's nothing better than that in the world.
Yeah, I know, and that's what's sorely lacking with Facebook. I have people on there I never even know who they are. I have no clue who they are, but I'm very appreciative for them being on there and following me. If I put stuff out, I feel good about that, and I don't know who listens to my podcast. I mean, it's just, I know I get good numbers out there. I know it's out there, but it's hard to see because we're in this virtual world. But then again, it gives us the opportunity to do what we're doing right now. I mean, we are talking face to face. You're 3,000 miles away from me, and those are the good things about it. But that is a big transit. And I wonder, as the banking industries move towards more and more digital, and money maybe will disappear. Maybe cash will disappear at some point in time, and everything will be in this digital format, which is easily reproducible. How does that manifest astrologically over time as we look at the evolution? We're talking Uranus will be in Taurus for 7 years roughly. So then by the time it gets into Gemini, where will we be with communication and all that? And this is looking down the road much further than you probably already have, but still,
I've looked. I mean, that's when you start to get Pluto, Uranus, and air signs.
I know.
Pluto, Aquarius, Uranus, and Gemini. But what worries me the most about Uranus and Gemini is that's every major American war. That's the Revolutionary War. That's the Civil War. That's World War II. So, I think we'll never leave. Taurus is Taurus. There's always going to be a physical good somewhere that people are going to trade forever on this earth, as long as we still are looking at astrology, I guess, the way it is. So I think when people start to identify with cryptocurrency and, with, understanding this more digital currency form, and it's like, I feel that that's not going to really go as big as people think. I think it also is going to be big, though, at the same time, but I think it's going to be something that we still haven't seen yet. The thing with Uranus is when you think you know, you don't know. You know what I mean? Everybody who thinks they are so sure, if you sure bet on a Uranian thing, you never do. When Uranus came into Aries after it had been in Pisces and then went back, we had that big Fukushima earthquake, right?
I remember, yeah.
And none of us knew it was going to be at that capacity. And then when Uranus just entered back and ingressed back in the retrograde, we had the fires in California. It was huge, and the biggest fires that we had ever had. And, I mean, literally 600-something people missing.
I know, still.
So Uranus can really just throw you for a loop like you've never even thought of. And I think when it comes to physical goods, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Prohibition a little bit, of Do you think that stopped people from trading alcohol, or creating kind of
Just
these
the
kind of
opposite.
underground businesses? I think things are going to go underground a little bit, and especially because we've got this control system of Capricorn that's going to be the biggest we've ever seen in our lives. It's reaching heights we've never even been to.
When you say control system, what do you refer to? Like,
I refer to whether that's corporate or governmental. I mean, literally, when you think of Facebook, when you think of YouTube, to get the information out there, it's going through more and more filters now. So censorship, I think, is going to be the biggest thing that we're going to have to deal with over this next 2 years. I mean, they're using the political system as a censorship aspect of whether we're calling it fake news, but I think that it's actually been a shadow for or a great kind of charade to actually not get certain information out. Now, I don't want to trigger people, but a good example is Alex Jones and InfoWars. I'm not saying I agree with the man, but his whole entire network, his apps, his YouTube, his Facebook, his everything was taken off because of some things that he had said in the world. But he brings up a lot of things, whether it was conspiracy theories about 9/11 or anything like that. I mean, it was interesting for a media network owner like myself to watch a man who has his own base, says what he wants to say, and it gets taken off completely to where you can't even watch him on anything anymore. You can't even have an app. The thing that worries me the most, and especially with what happened in the last time we had a lot of this Capricorn of Saturn Pluto, was in the 1500s. We had the church totally restricting what, certain artwork. Botticelli's, Birth of Venus wasn't allowed to be seen until the 1800s, even though it was made at the end of the 1400s. It went into not able to be seeing that picture. You look at Leonardo da Vinci at that time and his paintings, he's working for the church, but using secret elements to tell people a message, but can't, tell it out loud. Then you go to the 1280s and this whole last Saturn Pluto, when you have the church get rid of the Knights Templar and literally kill them. Yeah. And literally from that point on, we go into the Dark Ages after that. So censorship, all they have to do is say, well, astrology is not real, right? Because once you start adding this whole fake news thing, now we're going to start to go into other elements. That's not real. This isn't real. And there's these control systems. So YouTube will just be like, you know what? This is astrology. It's not real. We're not going to put it up. So I think Uranus and Taurus forces us to create our own.
They create your own narrative.
And having to go around. Yeah. And I think that's going to be, censorship is going to go into a lot of areas. And it kind of reminds me of the fascist movement, of the 30s, where it was like, no, you can't be doing this. No, you shouldn't be doing that. And I think that's the stuff where it's not to be scared of. It's just knowing okay, how do I find my own value and how do I create something on my own? I mean, it's not easy to sit out at a people don't even work in their garages anymore as much as they do. I remember when I was a kid, and build something.
Right.
I think it's reminding us we have to build things again.
Yeah, and then that brings back the earth quality of it, I think, because it's more rooted in sort of foundational qualities, which would be a nice turn of events, because that would be the best outcome of a Uranus-Taurus, conjunction, ingress, just because it would make it more palatable to get back to that. The censorship thing is a very disturbing thing to think about, because I can actually see that happening. I think that's a very, very valid point. Because we're already seeing it now. I wonder if people would put up with that. I'm wondering if there wouldn't be enough of a backlash to stop that, because we've had freedom of the press for so long, but now that we can manipulate what's being said, that can be up for grabs.
Yeah, this whole Jupiter-Neptune square of 2019 is bringing back to the last one, which was 1852 and 1853. Which was right after the election of Pierce, who was a Democrat, and then he went up against a Whig who lost, and that was pretty much the end of the Whig Party. And what was interesting was there was so much, turmoil over Uncle Tom's Cabin, the book at that time, because you got to remember also there wasn't no news like there is now. So it was mainly books. It was political cartoons. The political cartoons were extreme back then, and really harsh. And I think that we're seeing, with Jupiter in its home sign and Neptune in its home sign in the square form, this is going to be even more of what we saw during the election process of Clinton and Trump, because that was Saturn square Neptune.
Right. And
here we are going to have Jupiter in its home sign squared. So it's even more dramatic and it's even more intense. So I think that this is going to bring where nobody knows what information is truly. We have to do more research now. We have to go look even farther. And I think with Neptune and Pisces, there is an element. There's people shading things in ways that make it look certain ways. And I think that's the difficult part of this, is even when people do want to stand up for it, I think that there's a Neptunian distraction of, oh, don't worry, come into this virtual reality world and don't worry about it, or look at the drug epidemic, in the world. There's a lot of things of numbing down and not wanting to deal with the intense Capricorn work. It's work. It's like, who's going to show up for it and who's not?
It is work. And, the time period that you mentioned, the 1850s, was where the seeds of the Civil War were initially planted. I mean, they didn't come to fruition until later, obviously. And of course, during that time, Abraham Lincoln was defeated in his first election, and it wasn't until he tried again in 1860 that he actually gained the presidency. And there's some parallels that we can see there on the political face now. But the idea of censorship is a very, very scary thing, especially for someone such as yourself in a media environment, as a media empire that you have. What do you do with that? I mean, how do you get around it? You have to find your own. You have to get your own cell towers.
It's being political.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing about being Capricornian, right?
Yeah,
it's about being political, because you're going to have to, even though you want to say what you want to say, you have to say it in a way that's not going to trigger people or create discourse. Capricorn is presentation. Capricorn is tailored, wearing a suit to the party and knowing you talk to this person. It's a lot like House of Cards, the show. Yeah. I mean, it really is not about, and especially with Uranus and Taurus too, there is this elegance of Taurus, right? And so Uranus has to find a way to find elegance in the way that it presents its radical form. It just can't come in and say, and like we've seen in Aries, like we saw, all over the world, the people just being able to be like, yeah, blah, I want to do this and that. With Taurus, there's an elegant way of presentation.
Refined. It's very refined, yeah.
So it's about a refining form, which I think that's going to be the secret out of censorship. And also, maybe you're not able to drop as many intense truth bombs as you want right away, but I think that people are able to see it through the elegant work or through artwork. I think Uranus and Taurus is going to force art to come back in a big way, which I know you're a huge artist. I think this is going to be a huge revolution, because of the Renaissance periods was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of Capricorn. I think we're about to enter into a huge Renaissance. I think things like art are going to be valued again as more valuable than, a PlayStation game.
Right, exactly, yeah. And art usually drives the narrative, believe it or not. You look back through history, it's always the art that's the leading edge. You see that as the leading edge, pushing the dialogue and the course going forward. We're almost out of time here, so I'm just curious of what your parting thoughts are about what we see going on, what sort of your takeaways, your big picture things that you're seeing. I've got my own versions of what I think are going to be. I think, and we probably share the same thoughts, but, like you just finished writing this book, what do you think is the major upheaval, or what's the major revelations that will be coming up in 2019?
I think the major revelations is the change in individuals' understanding of how their partnerships work. I mean, I think that the finishing up of this cycle of Saturn, Pluto, and Libra, with Venus that just went through retrograde in Libra at the end of 2018, opposing Uranus, that is at pretty much the same point of where that conjunction was, and with this new conjunction beginning in Capricorn, I really feel that, when it comes to relationships and then when it comes to people's deeper form of their life force, because Saturn and Pluto were in Scorpio then and we're finishing this Scorpio, this is allowing people to finally connect with, not only themselves and the partnerships that feel real, but this is a change in the world that we've never seen internally. People really starting to go, this is the direction I want to go. These are the kind of partnerships I want. I mean, I think we're going to see more of an internal, form of people starting to really be okay with the liberation of who they really are and allowing themselves to not judge themselves so much.
It's like about self-forgiveness, I think. Self-forgiveness and acceptance of yourself is a big thing. I think there's going to be a much stronger turn towards a feminine sort of hierarchy, less masculine hierarchy. I think that the backlash of what we're seeing now is going to be that. I think we're seeing a forcing function. The forcing function was the election in 2016 that had to happen in order to set the ball in motion to return the pendulum the other direction. I think we're seeing that. So over the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of that, which I think is time. It's overdue. And it is. We're looking for balance. We're striving for balance always. And so this is a scorecard that has to be balanced in some way. Anyway, we've been talking today with the one and only, the Leo King. His website is The Leo King. He's done more for contemporary astrology than anybody I can possibly imagine right now. I think he's brought it to a whole new level. I, for one, am very grateful for what you've done. I think it's admirable. I know you've had a lot of detractors along the way. I know it's been a long, hard climb, but I'm very appreciative about what you've done because I think you've sort of made astrology, brought astrology to a place where it's accessible, palatable, and fun, as well as enlightening, and it helps people in so many ways. I think that the truth is there and it's embedded there. So I really do appreciate what you've done. It's been great having you on here today. I will do all I can to support you, and from my end of my small perch, but keep on keeping on.
Oh, thank you, Chris. And I always appreciate you as a friend and a colleague, and I truly love what you do, and I'm always here to help it the same way. And I'll be blasting you as much as I can. So
blast me powerfully, and only as Leo can. Very good. Thanks so much, David. David Palmer today, the Leo King, theleoking.com. Get his app. He's on Facebook. He's on YouTube. He's basically everywhere you can possibly imagine, except for the planet, except for the moon. But he may be there soon someday. We don't know. But he's everywhere. He's a force to be reckoned with. He's brought astrology to a whole new level. Very grateful to have you on today. Thanks so much, David. It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Chris.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.